Христос Воскрес! І вітаємо вас, шановні глядачі, на цьому спеціальному випуску української телепрограми «Контакт», котру ми присвячуємо 12-й річниці ядерної катастрофи в Чорнобилі. 12 років тому весь світ потрясла вістка про вибух 4-го реактора Чорнобильської атомної електростанції. І таким чином цілий світ дізнався, що на земній кулі існує держава, яка називається Україна. Сьогодні ми згадуємо всіх тих, хто постраждав від цієї аварії, а особливо найменших жертв. Пригадаємо, як це все сталося і як українська діаспора сьогодні допомагає цим жертвам.
April 26, 1986, marks the date of the world's largest nuclear disaster, the explosion at the Chernobyl nuclear power station in Ukraine. Operator error caused a dramatic power surge that blew the concrete roof off of reactor number 4, spewing at least 50 tons of radioactive fuel into the atmosphere and triggering a series of irreparable consequences for the land and its people. According to Ukraine's Environment Minister Yuri Kutsenko, more than 3 million people and over 50,000 square kilometers in 18 Ukrainian regions were affected by the fallout. Nearly 1,800 towns and settlements were and continue to be exposed to dangerous levels of radiation. In the first 2 years after the disaster, Soviet scientists monitored unusual growth spurts in plants, animals, birds, and fish. They found that nearly every plant and animal in the radiated areas had some distortion from normal chromosomes and DNA patterns. Dr. David Marples, one of the world's foremost authorities on Chernobyl, often speaks to these issues.
Today we're seeing a number of serious health problems, outbreaks of thyroid gland cancer among children. We're starting to see an increase in leukemia now among cleanup crews, about double the rate of the normal population, and a number of illnesses that it's not clear quite whether they're related to radiation or not, but it's all increased significantly since Chernobyl. What one has today is really a sort of dead zone of something like 100,000 square kilometers of land. Most seriously affected is immediately around the reactor itself, but there's a much broader area that will be contaminated for at least the next 3 decades in places, and plutonium hotspots are fairly isolated, but they could last for 24,000 years. I think we may see some attempts to restart agricultural production in parts of the contaminated areas, but it's very difficult because the groundwater today is more contaminated in some areas than it was 10 years ago. And therefore, I don't think we'll ever see all this area in complete use again. I think some of it will be permanently out of use. Some parts of it may be recultivated with some difficulty.
An estimated 900,000 children in Ukraine have received significant doses of radiation. Leukemia rates in children and adults have risen sharply, as have instances of thyroid cancer in children, a disease virtually unheard of before the explosion. The legacy of Chernobyl is that far more land was poisoned than can ever be cleaned or evacuated. Far more people need to be resettled than will ever be moved. Far more illness is evident than Soviet officials ever admitted or predicted. Far more uncontaminated food, far more medical care, far more money is needed than a country staggered by other troubles can give. Everyone must understand that Chernobyl is not a local Ukrainian problem. It is not a Ukrainian-Canadian problem, but a global issue that must be addressed immediately in order to prevent another great tragedy. In 1989, a group of concerned Canadians founded the Children of Chernobyl Canadian Fund, a registered charitable organization whose directors and members are all volunteers from fields including medicine, pharmacy, physiotherapy, dentistry, finance, and education. Initially, the fund's mission was to assist the victims of the 1986 nuclear disaster. After a few years, it became obvious that the need for humanitarian aid was much broader than anticipated, and the fund's mandate expanded to help children in orphanages, hospitals, and rehabilitation centers, and to provide extra care for physically challenged children and adults throughout Ukraine. CCCF has supplied numerous hospitals and clinics with incubators, blood analysis units, antibiotics, anesthetics, disposable syringes, sutures, intravenous fluids, wheelchairs, walkers, research microscopes, specialized rehabilitation equipment, medical texts, hospital bedding and linen, operating equipment, vitamins, disinfectants, infant formula, and much more. The CCCF is pleased to receive continued support for these projects from Christopher Westall, the Canadian ambassador to Ukraine in Kyiv. Over the years, the CCCF has also sponsored and administered a number of longer-term projects. Project Nadia, Hope. There are 85,000 children in Ukraine with cerebral palsy and other physical disabilities. Sadly, there are virtually no therapists to teach them to move, to communicate, and to feel like valued members of their community. In 1994, CCCF began providing financial and professional resources to the Nadia Association, a group of parents who had established a school and rehabilitation center, Джерело, in Lviv to give their physically disabled children access to education, rehabilitation, speech, and massage therapy. The city of Lviv has donated an unfinished building, and CCCF is working with the Nadia Association to complete construction and establish a permanent, full-service education, rehabilitation, and training center for children throughout Ukraine. Zhenya Kushpeta, a volunteer Canadian living in Ukraine, has been the driving force in the fundraising and organizational efforts for this project. Lviv Rehabilitation Project. In recognition of the critical need for functioning rehabilitation therapists in Ukraine, CCCF initiated a training program called the Lviv Rehabilitation Project, in partnership with the Canadian government through Partners in Health, the Lviv Institute of Physical Culture, Queen's University in Kingston, McMaster University in Hamilton, and now the University of Manitoba Faculty of Rehabilitation. Canadian physiotherapist Oksana Kunanets provides training to undergraduate rehabilitation therapists from all parts of Ukraine so that they can begin to meet the needs of physically disabled children and adults throughout the country. Because Ukraine has no rehabilitation programs, this project has attracted national attention and is regarded as a model for future projects. Ruslana Vzhesnievska and the many members of the Help Us Help the Children project have distributed close to $10 million in direct aid to 50,000 children in 135 orphanages throughout Ukraine. Volunteers deliver medicine, food, vitamins, clothing, and educational materials during dedicated distribution trips to Ukraine in order to improve the quality of life and basic health care for these children. This project raises funds and awareness through TV telethons, fashion shows, and many special events, such as this grand gala with Ontario's Lieutenant Governor, the Honourable Hilary Weston, in attendance.
Children have seen those children, seen them in pain, and have not stood back. You have had the courage to take the initiative to change their lives. You have set an incredible example internationally, which has encouraged governments to follow suit. And as volunteers have invested your time, your resources, and often risked your personal safety to make life a little better for thousands of orphans in Ukraine.
Ivánkyov. In addition to these large-scale projects, members of the CCCF Windsor branch distribute medical supplies annually to 5,000 children in more than 30 schools, centers, and clinics in and around Ivánkyov, 25 kilometers from the Chernobyl zone. Zhytomyr. At the initiative of the CCCF Ottawa branch, an incubator was purchased for the hospital in Zhytomyr, on the outskirts of the Chernobyl zone. It was presented to Ukraine's Minister of Health in 1996. Kyiv Institute for Cardiovascular Surgery. In 1992, CCCF acquired a 10-bed intensive care unit, which it donated to the Kyiv Institute for Cardiovascular Surgery. The fund also sent a Canadian technician to install the unit and train medical staff in its use. CCCF also sends basic medical supplies on an ad hoc basis to smaller towns and areas that have absorbed resettled Chernobyl victims. While its mandate and finances do not permit it to provide aid to individuals directly, the fund does attempt to direct such requests to other appropriate organizations. The Children of Chernobyl Canadian Fund wishes to express its sincere gratitude to the generous donors and volunteers who make all these projects possible. We gratefully acknowledge the Government of Canada, Government of Ukraine, and the Government of Ontario for their continued assistance and support. Many heartfelt thanks to all our donors.
Моя смереко.